The sound of the sander tore through the quiet evening, sharp and steady, before dying into the hum of late summer cicadas. When Andre Walker let go of the switch, only the lake's soft rhythm remained, somewhere beyond the apple trees. The light was thick and gold, spilling across the driveway and the worn surface of his old 1996 GMC motorhome. He called her Maple, like every stubborn thing that refused to give up. He wiped the dust off the chrome mirror, watching his reflection bend and shimmer across the dull metal. Across the cedar fence, a voice floated through the air, light and teasing. "If I were you," she said, "I'd drive that thing straight to Tofino and never look back." Andre looked up. The woman was leaning on the fence, elbow deep in paint stains and sunlight. She had a mason jar of cider in one hand, and eyes that held the easy confidence of someone who'd already decided she had nothing left to lose. He smirked, setting the rag down. "You'd make it halfway through Manitoba and regret it," he said. "Gas alone would bankrupt you." She smiled, small but bright. "Then it would be a noble bankruptcy. You look like a man who could use one." He said nothing. Silence had been his companion since the accident 3 years ago. Words had weight, and his shoulders already carried too much. He went back to polishing Maple's front panel, while the radio hummed Feist's soft voice, counting 1, 2, 3, 4 like a heartbeat. The woman tilted her head, recognizing the song. "Feist," she said. "Didn't peg you for a nostalgic type." Andre grunted, glancing up. "Didn't peg you for a neighbor who talks in daydreams." She laughed. "I'm not a daydream. I'm your next-door mistake waiting to happen." Her name was Claire Beaumont, a painter from Ottawa by way of Montreal, or maybe the other way around. She'd moved into her grandmother's old house in Picton for the summer, hoping quiet air and cider would fix what the city had broken. He'd seen her before, hauling canvases up the porch steps, each one full of skies that looked too wide to fit inside her small frame. "You're running from something," he said, without looking at her. "Detox," she replied. "From deadlines, critics, and pretending my work matters." She nodded toward the RV. "What about you? Still pretending she'll run again?" Andre's hand paused mid-wipe. "She runs fine, just waiting for the right reason." Claire studied him, her tone softening. "You've got that look," she said, "like a man who hides his soul behind socket wrenches." He didn't answer. The air between them stretched thin, wrapped in the smell of engine oil and grass. "When's the last time you took her out?" she asked. 3 years since, he said, the words heavy. "Before my wife passed." She blinked, cider jar catching the last flash of light. "I'm sorry," he nodded once, a mechanic's nod, short and complete. Behind him the garage light flicked on. Inside were photographs, lined up like quiet witnesses. His daughter, Maya at 10, smiling through missing teeth, and his son Jerome at 20, serious, distant, somewhere in Calgary chasing the life Andre once wanted for himself. He hadn't spoken to Jerome in 2 years, not since the night grief made him mean, and words cut deeper than he'd planned. Claire took another sip and leaned against the fence. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. "Going west, maybe?" He looked up. "Where would I go?" "Anywhere but still here." He laughed quietly. "You talk like someone with a full tank and no map." "That's the point," she said. The pause that followed was neither awkward nor empty. It was the kind of silence that carried its own heartbeat. A pickup passed on the gravel road, headlights washing over them before fading into dusk. Andre's hands moved automatically, checking Maple's mirrors, tightening a bolt that didn't need tightening. Claire watched, smiling. "You know," she said, "people who fix things are usually trying to fix themselves." "Then you must know what that's like," he said. "Painters do the same thing," she grinned. "Touché." The sky deepened to violet, the edges of the orchard glowing under a string of tired fairy lights. Fireflies blinked near the grass, small sparks rising and vanishing. Andre gathered his tools, folding the cloth with careful precision, each crease a small surrender to order. Claire hesitated, then pushed off the fence. "You fix engines, I paint light," she said. "Maybe someday we'll trade jobs." You'd hate the grease, he told her. You'd hate the silence, she shot back. She started toward the porch, her silhouette framed by the fading sun. At the steps she turned, raising her jar in a lazy salute. Good night, Mr. Walker. Good night, Miss Beaumont. When she was gone, the quiet came rushing back, thick and alive. Andre looked at Maple again. Her paint had dulled, her tires needed air, but she still held herself like something proud and waiting. He knelt to check the rear wheel and noticed something wedged beneath the tire. He pulled it out, a folded sketch, smudged with graphite. The drawing was rough but full of motion. 2 figures inside an RV, one laughing, one driving, the world wide open around them. Underneath, in looping handwriting, were the words, "What are we waiting for?" He stared at it, his breath catching somewhere between surprise and recognition. For 3 years, he'd told himself time would restart when he was ready, but time never waited. He slid the paper into his jacket pocket and stood up. Inside the RV, the radio had changed songs. Joni Mitchell's voice floated through the open door, singing about rivers and distance, about love you can't forget. Andre climbed the steps and sat behind the wheel. The leather was cracked, cool beneath his palms. He didn't start the engine, just rested there, staring through the windshield at a sky peppered with stars. He thought of his kids, of the house too quiet for its own good, and of the woman next door who painted light because she'd forgotten how to live in it. Somewhere out west, the Pacific waited, steady and unbothered. He smiled faintly and whispered, "What are we waiting for?" The question echoed through the cabin, gentle but unrelenting, and for the first time in years, he felt the answer forming. Not in words, but in motion. The night settled around Maple, and the old radio hummed softly like an engine remembering its purpose. If this story makes you pause, if it reminds you of a dream you left parked too long in your own driveway, maybe it's time to start the engine again. Like, share, or tell us what you're still waiting to say yes to, because sometimes all it takes is one turn of the key. At dawn, the light crept in like forgiveness, soft and gold, through the mist curling over the orchard. Claire woke to the sound of gravel shifting outside, an old engine coughing itself awake after too many silent years. She stepped to the porch, barefoot, the boards cool beneath her feet, and saw it. The RV that had slept in Andre's driveway for as long as she'd been here, headlights blinking like groggy eyes. On the welcome mat, a set of keys rested atop a folded note, grease-smudged and brief. She still runs. Her breath caught. The words were so simple they almost didn't feel real. Claire crouched, the paper trembling in her hand. Beyond the orchard, she could see Andre leaning into Maple's open hood, shoulders hunched, expression unreadable. Steam lifted from the radiator like the ghost of old summers. "Thought I'd test her out," he said when he saw her. Voice half lost under the rumble. "She sounds like she's dying," Claire replied, shouting over the engine. He smiled faintly. "That's just her waking up. Bears make noise too when they come out of hibernation." She folded the note into her pocket and stepped closer. The smell of fuel mixed with dew and apple blossoms. Maple's front grill rattled like laughter held too long. "You offering me a ride?" she asked. Andre hesitated, then gestured to the open door. 2, maybe 3 days. A trial run. No promises. No maps? Just instincts and side roads. She nodded once, the way people do when they already know the answer. "Give me 10 minutes. Inside the house, she moved quickly. A canvas tote, swallowed, brushes, watercolor tins, 2 sketchbooks, and her old Polaroid camera, the one that printed light faster than memory could fade it. She caught her reflection in the hallway mirror and almost laughed. Her hair was a mess, her jeans streaked with paint, her heart too loud. When she returned, Andre was in the driver's seat, tapping the dashboard with a wrench, like a priest blessing an altar. "You sure?" he asked, eyes steady but cautious. "Nsuit," she said, climbing the steps. "But that's the point." The RV groaned as she settled into the passenger seat, the springs protesting, the whole frame vibrating with potential. Andre turned the key again. Maple sputtered, coughed, then roared. A deep, reluctant growl that shook the air. Smoke puffed from the exhaust like a sigh from an old soul. They rolled out of the driveway slow, the orchard shrinking behind them. The road ahead wound, between fields, washed pale by early light. Fences glinting with dew. Neither spoke for several minutes. The only sounds were the low hum of the tires and the rhythmic clatter of loose screws somewhere near the glove box. Claire watched his hands on the wheel. Broad, careful, calloused. She wondered if they'd ever been gentle without purpose, without fixing or holding something broken. Finally, she said, "You realize you just invited a stranger on a road trip?" Andre kept his eyes on the road. "I figured you'd keep things interesting." "I usually do." They passed a stretch of open field where a single windmill turned slow against the sky. The sun caught its blades, scattering light through the windshield. Claire lifted her Polaroid, framed the moment, and pressed the shutter. The camera spat out a picture with a satisfying click. "You still use that thing?" Andre asked. "It tells the truth," she said. "Phones edit too much." He nodded as if that made perfect sense. After an hour, they stopped at a gas station just outside Bloomfield. Andre checked the tires, while Claire disappeared inside. She returned with 2 coffees, a bag of pretzels, and a small pink air freshener shaped like a flamingo. She hung it on the rearview mirror with a grin. "What's that for, at size?" he asked. "Decoration. Every adventure needs a mascot." He shook his head, amused despite himself. "You're going to make Maple blush?" "She's been gray long enough." Back on the road, the landscape began to widen. Rows of vineyards blurred past, the smell of damp soil and diesel blending into something almost sweet. Claire leaned her head against the window, watching the glass tremble with every bump. "Where exactly are we headed?" she asked. Andre shrugged. "West, maybe lake on the mountain, maybe farther." "That's not an answer. That's all I've got." She smiled at the honesty of it. "Fair enough." The highway narrowed into a country road lined with tall grass. Wildflowers brushed against Maple's sides as they passed. The air inside grew warmer, filled with the faint scent of coffee and mechanical life. Claire flipped through her sketchbook. "You know," she said, "I used to paint like this. Movement, not composition. Just following where the line wanted to go." Andre glanced over. "What stopped you?" "The world wanted perfection. Perfection's the fastest way to kill joy." He considered that. "I get that. Engines don't like being too perfect either. A little looseness keeps them breathing." She turned to him, studying his profile against the blur of trees. "You talk about machines like they're people." He smiled, eyes still forward. "Sometimes they're easier to understand." They drove until noon. The light shifted, harsher now, pressing down through the windshield. They pulled over by a small creek and ate in silence. Sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, pretzels between them. Claire dipped her toes in the cold water, while Andre leaned against Maple's bumper, the sun marking lines on his arms. "It's strange," she said, flicking a pebble into the current. "I feel like we've both been parked for a long time." He looked at her, then at the horizon, where the water met trees. "Maybe this is just idling before the real drive," she smiled. "I like that." They sat there for a while, not needing to fill the air. When the wind shifted, the flamingo air freshener swung gently, ticking the rhythm of the road that waited ahead. As the afternoon stretched, they climbed back in. Andre turned the key. Maple answered with a soft rumble, stronger this time. Claire reached for her camera again, capturing the reflection of sky in the windshield. The curve of his smile she pretended not to notice. 2 people, 1 old RV, and a direction measured not in miles, but in moments. The road unfurled before them, and for the first time in a long while, neither of them looked back. By mid-morning, the sun had burned through the thin mist that hung over the road. The Trans-Canada signs came and went, like quiet promises, and Maple rumbled along the 2-lane stretch that led toward Belleville. The hum of the tires was steady, the kind of rhythm that made you believe the world still had a pulse. Claire had kicked off her shoes, 1 foot resting on the dashboard, sketchbook balanced on her knees. Andre drove with the window half open, one arm outstretched, catching the wind as it moved through his fingers. The road curved, past fields, where hay bales glowed gold under the August sun. They hadn't spoken much since the creek. Silence came easy between them now. Not heavy, not tense, but something that carried its own warmth. When Maple's fuel light blinked red, Andre eased her into a small gas station outside Belleville, the kind that hadn't changed since the 90s. The canopy sign creaked. A mural of a trout on the side wall had faded into pale ghost color. "I'll fill up," Andre said. Claire stretched, hair falling loose around her face. "I'll get snacks. Maybe inspiration." Inside, the convenience store smelled of coffee grounds and old newsprint. A tiny bell jingled overhead as she walked in. The clerk, a man in his 60s wearing a baseball cap that read, "World's Okayest Fisherman," nodded politely, but didn't look up from his crossword. Claire wandered between the aisles until something on the shelf caught her eye. A wooden compass, small and circular, with a cracked glass face. Its needle was stuck, pointing stubbornly east. "How much for this?" she asked, holding it up. The clerk looked over his glasses. "That old thing? $2 if you promise not to bring it back when it gets you lost." She smiled. "I'll take my chances." At the counter, she added a maple leaf scented air freshener shaped like a pine tree. Bright pink, almost offensively cheerful. Back outside, Andre finished wiping the oil dipstick and looked up as she approached. "What did you find?" "Treasure," she said, handing him the compass. He turned it in his hands, watching the stuck needle glint under the light. "It's broken." "It's just loyal to the east," she countered. "Every rebel needs direction." Andre laughed softly and shook his head. "You're something else." "And you," she said, hanging the pink air freshener on the mirror. "Need more color in your life." "Maple smells like perfume at a truck stop. That's the scent of optimism." They pulled back onto the highway, the compass resting on the dashboard between them, its needle unmoved. Claire hummed along to Blue Rodeo playing through the static, soft, imperfect, and perfectly Canadian. By noon, they veered off onto a gravel road leading to a lakeshore picnic area. The lake shimmered under the sun, a mirror that swallowed the sky whole. Andre parked near a clump of birch trees. The engine sighed into stillness, and for a long moment, the only sound was water lapping at the rocks. Claire spread a blanket on the ground, while Andre pulled sandwiches from a cooler. He handed her one wrapped in brown paper. "Turkey or mystery meat?" he said. "I'll live dangerously," she replied, unwrapping it. They ate quietly, the breeze brushing against them like a whisper. Claire pulled out her Polaroid and snapped a photo of the lake, the picture printed slowly, colors forming like shy thoughts. After a while, she said, "You seem lighter when you drive." Andre chewed thoughtfully, eyes on the horizon. "Maybe because it's the only time I don't feel trapped." She turned to look at him. "Trapped how?" He hesitated. The gulls cried overhead, filling the silence he needed. "After she passed, I just stopped moving. I thought staying still would make it hurt less, but grief's a funny mechanic. You ignore it, it seizes up the whole system." Claire didn't speak. She just watched the water glint against his face, the sunlight carving new edges into his grief. "I kept the house the same," he continued. Her mug still on the counter, her coat still on the hook. "Thought if I didn't change anything, I wouldn't have to admit she was gone. And now," he exhaled, "now I'm not sure what's left of me when I'm not stuck." Claire picked up a smooth stone and rolled it in her palm. "Maybe that's what this trip is for. Not to escape the past, just to loosen it." He nodded slowly. "You make that sound easy. It's not, but sometimes you just drive until something inside unclenches." For a moment they sat in silence, the world pared down to wind, water, and breath. Then Claire reached into her bag, pulled out a small notepad, and tore off a sheet. She scribbled something quickly, then taped it to the cabinet inside Maple, just above the tiny kitchenette. Andre leaned over to read it. The handwriting looped and slanted like laughter caught midair. Day 1. Running in the right direction. He smiled faintly. Is that what this is? She shrugged. Feels like it. He studied her, the way her eyes reflected both sunlight and something deeper, a defiance against stillness, maybe even against despair. A dragonfly skimmed the water's surface, wings flashing silver. Somewhere far off, a boat engine started, low and steady, like a heart deciding to beat again. Andre stood, brushed crumbs from his hands, and said quietly, "Let's keep driving." Claire packed the blanket, tucking the compass into the dashboard's groove. The needle still pointed east, but as the RV rumbled to life, it trembled, just a little, as if tempted by change. The road waited, unspooling between fields and sky. The pink air freshener swung back and forth, keeping time with the hum of the tires. Claire reached for her camera again, and Andre caught her reflection smiling in the glass. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about where he'd been. He was thinking about where he might finally go. By late afternoon, the road began to narrow, the world folding into pine and shadow. The air turned cooler as they crossed into Kawartha Lakes, that quiet region of half-forgotten towns and long, glassy waters. Maple climbed a hill with the stubborn patience of an old mare, her engine humming low, the scent of pine resin and motor oil filling the cabin. Claire had the window down, her hair whipped into ribbons by the wind. "Let's stop somewhere before the sun disappears," she said. "I want to paint before the light changes." Andre nodded and followed a side road marked Peterborough, Algonquin Trail. It led them to a small lake, barely a shimmer between the trees. The parking lot was empty, except for a row of picnic tables and a hand-painted sign that read, "No camping. Be kind to the loons." They parked by the water. The lake was perfectly still, black mirror, ringed with spruce. Andre turned off the ignition, and the engine sighed into silence. For a long moment, they just listened. The faint rustle of branches, the distant call of a bird, and their own breathing soft against the cool air. Claire stepped out first, carrying her sketch kit. "This light," she murmured. "It's like the sky forgot to let go." She set up her easel near the water's edge, feet sinking slightly into the damp soil. With practiced ease, she mixed colors, indigo and burnt sienna, small jars of lake and shadow. Each stroke on the paper was deliberate, yet instinctive, the way someone exhales after holding breath too long. Andre busied himself near Maple, adjusting a squeaky hinge on the door. The rhythm of his wrench matched the rhythm of her brush. He hummed under his breath, a Leonard Cohen line escaping half-sung. "There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." Claire smiled without looking up. "You have good taste." "Old habits," he said. "Cohen's the only poet who ever fixed my head when I couldn't fix anything else." "Seems fitting," she said, dipping her brush again. "He'd like this light." They worked side by side in silence, connected by sound and absence of sound. The sky slowly bruised to lavender. When Claire finally stepped back, her hands streaked with blue, she said, "It's not perfect, but it feels alive." Andre glanced over the canvas. The painting caught the lake's reflection, not pristine, not symmetrical, but full of movement, a trembling between stillness and change. "That's the best kind," he said. "The ones that breathe." Claire smiled, tucking a loose strand behind her ear. "You talk about paintings like you talk about engines." "Maybe I don't know the difference anymore," he admitted. As dusk settled, the two of them built a small fire in the pit near the shore. Andre worked the lighter with a mechanic's precision until the flames took, climbing upward with a crackle that reminded them both of home. The smoke curled sweet and slow, carrying the scent of cedar and burnt bread. Claire sat cross-legged, sketchbook in her lap, drawing the lines of his face by firelight. Andre noticed and grinned. "You trying to make me immortal?" "Just keeping record," she said softly. "You're not easy to read." He poked at the fire with a stick. Sparks leapt, then fell. "Not much to read, really. Just an old mechanic trying to remember what moving forward feels like." She watched the flames flicker across his face, tracing the worn geography of grief and endurance. After a moment, she asked quietly, Can I ask you something? He looked up, eyes reflecting the fire. Sure. Why did you invite me? Andre took his time answering. The fire popped. Somewhere far across the lake, a loon called out, its voice, hollow and haunting, like sorrow echoing through trees. He stared into the flames, speaking slowly. Because with you, silence doesn't feel like punishment. It just feels like space. Claire's throat tightened. That's the kindest reason I've ever heard. He shrugged. Didn't plan on kindness, just honesty. They sat quietly after that. The loon called again, its echo slipping across the dark water. Claire shivered, pulling her jacket tighter. They say loons mate for life, she said. Andre nodded. Yeah, I read that once. Did you and your wife ever come this way? He hesitated, staring into the fire. We planned to. Used to talk about driving all the way to the coast. Said we'd see the Pacific together, just once. She loved the idea of the road, the not knowing, the endlessness. But she got sick before we made it. Claire didn't reply. The flames painted their faces in shades of gold and amber. Did you promise her? She asked finally. He swallowed hard. I said we'd go next summer. Then another and another. You tell yourself there'll be time, until one day there isn't. The loon's cry drifted again, distant but clearer this time, rising and falling like breath. Claire reached out, laid her hand gently on his arm. Then maybe this is the summer, she said. Andre looked at her, the fire reflected in his eyes. For the first time, the grief there looked less like a wound and more like a scar, still tender but healing. Maybe, he whispered. They stayed by the fire until the stars came out, their reflections trembling in the water like faint memories. Claire drew the scene one last time. 2 figures, 1 flame, a dark lake, and a bird's song fading into night. When the fire burned low, Andre fed it one last piece of driftwood. We should rest, he said, his voice low. Long road tomorrow. Claire nodded, packing her brushes. Where to? He smiled. Just a ghost of one. West, he said. Always west. The loon called once more, softer now, as if blessing the road ahead. The lake shimmered, the fire hissed out, and the night folded around them. 2 travelers, one carrying grief, the other carrying color, both finally learning how to move again. The air changed as they drove north. By the time the sign for Wawa appeared, the pines had grown taller, the wind sharper, and the land itself seemed to widen into something ancient and unafraid. Lake Superior stretched beside the highway, vast, steel blue, breathing in slow waves that looked capable of swallowing whole towns. Maple rattled along the coastal road, her old bones protesting each turn. Andre kept both hands firm on the wheel, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the water met the sky in a line so thin it could break. Claire sat cross-legged in the passenger seat, her sketchbook open but forgotten. I thought Ontario ended at Toronto, she said after a while. Andre smirked. That's what everyone thinks until they meet the lake. Then they realize the country keeps going bigger, wilder, quieter. The road curved around a bluff, revealing a lookout point marked by a faded sign, Marathon Bay, Rest Area. He pulled over. The moment she stepped out, the wind hit them both like truth. Cold, unfiltered, but alive. Waves crashed against dark rocks below, spray leaping like sparks. Claire wrapped her scarf tighter around her neck. Andre just stood still, breathing in the air that smelled of rain and iron. Beautiful, she said softly. It's the kind that doesn't care if you notice, Andre replied. They stood side by side, watching the whitecaps roll toward shore. The lake seemed endless, stretching farther than memory. Claire looked at him, her voice lighter now. You know, you've got more walls than a museum, Andre turned, surprised. What's that supposed to mean? It means you walk around like every feeling you've ever had is on display, but behind glass. She smiled, teasing but gentle. You even catalog them, I bet. Here we have regret, circa 2019. He chuckled, shaking his head. You think you're funny. I think I'm observant, she said. Andre leaned on the railing, eyes tracing the horizon. Maybe I just learned not to touch the exhibits. Even the ones worth touching? She asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the side compartment of Maple and pulled out a small wooden box, the kind built to keep secrets dry. He held it for a long time before opening it. Inside, a few envelopes sat neatly stacked, some yellowed, others still crisp. Claire noticed the top one was addressed to Jerome Walker, another to Darlene, letters never sent. Andre thumbed the edges of the paper, his hands steady, but his breath uneven. These were supposed to be goodbyes, he said, but I could never finish them. Didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound like starting over. Claire crouched beside him. Maybe that's the point, she said. You don't finish them. You just carry them until they stop hurting. He nodded, closing the box gently. Maybe. He slid it back under the seat instead of tossing it into the lake like part of him had wanted. For a while they just listened, to wind, to water, to the long hush that exists only where grief and peace overlap. Claire took out her Polaroid camera. Stay still, she said. He frowned. Why? Because I'm stealing proof. She stepped back, framed the shot, Maple behind them, the lake flashing silver in the background. Andre stood by the railing, hands in pockets, eyes lost somewhere between past and horizon. She clicked the shutter. The photo slid out, its image ghosting into view. The RV, two small silhouettes, one looking east, one west. Claire waved it dry, then smiled. Our first artifact. He looked at the picture and laughed under his breath. You really think we're worth documenting? Absolutely, she said. Even museums need new exhibits. They ate a late lunch, sitting on the hood of Maple, bread, cheese, and the quiet company of wind. Claire sketched, while Andre tuned the radio, finding only static and faint French voices from somewhere across the lake. The sound crackled like old memories trying to return. When the sun began to tilt west, Andre climbed down and checked the tires. Claire followed, camera still in hand. You really were going to throw those letters away, weren't you? She asked. He nodded. Thought if I got rid of them, maybe the guilt would go too, but... He glanced at the water, its gray surface flickering with light. Turns out grief floats. She touched his arm. So keep them. Let them remind you where you've been, not where you're stuck. Andre met her gaze. Something unspoken passing between them. Recognition, maybe even trust. The kind that doesn't need explaining. When they returned to Maple, Claire taped the Polaroid onto the cabinet above the kitchenette. Beneath it, she scribbled in blue ink, Maple and two shadows, Lake Superior. Andre stood back, studying the small square of memory pinned like a promise. Two shadows, Ertefus. He said, I like that. They'll multiply, she said, if we're lucky. He smiled faintly, starting the engine. Maple coughed once, then settled into a steady purr. The light outside turned gold, brushing over the lake's restless surface. As they pulled back onto the highway, Claire glanced at the dashboard. The broken compass still sat there, its needle trembling faintly now, not fixed, not free, but alive. She turned to Andre, her voice almost lost in the hum of the road. Where to next? He didn't hesitate. Where the wind stops being cold. And with that, they drove west. The lake on one side, the setting sun on the other, and between them the quiet understanding that sometimes moving forward isn't about distance. It's about daring to keep what you can't let go. By the time Maple rolled into Thunder Bay, the late summer sky had turned a pale silver. The highway narrowed into a string of stoplights and small auto shops, each one smelling faintly of oil, coffee, and perseverance. Andre eased Maple into a gravel lot with a wooden sign that read, Singh & Sons Auto Repair. Honest work, fair price. The RV gave a tired sigh as the engine shut down. Claire looked around, smiling. She sounds like she needs a spa day, Andre grinned. More like a transplant. Inside, the garage buzzed with life. The sound of pneumatic tools, laughter, and Punjabi music spilling from a small radio filled the air. Mr. Singh, a man in his late 50s with a kind face framed by a grey turban, emerged from behind a half-rebuilt pickup truck. "Brother," he boomed, wiping his hands on a rag. "That's an old beauty you've got there. GMC 96, yes?" Andre nodded. "She's been holding up better than I expected. But the rear differential's singing off-key," Mr. Singh chuckled. "Then we'll make her hum again. No one drives all the way up here just to stall." He motioned toward two younger mechanics. "Kavi, Aman. Help our friends here. And make tea, it's cold today." Claire looked around, fascinated by the organized chaos. Wrenches, stacked like instruments. A wall of license plates from every province. Even one reading, "Keep calm and change oil." "This place feels alive," she said. Mr. Singh laughed. "It has to be. Machines need heart, same as people. Without community, engines and souls both rust." Andre smiled faintly. "Couldn't agree more." They opened Maple's hood, and Andre slipped back into the language of bolts and belts. He crouched beside Kavi, the youngest mechanic, a wiry kid with oil-streaked fingers and an eager grin. "Ever worked on an RV this old?" Andre asked. Kavi shook his head. "Only newer Fords. This one sounds different." Andre tilted his head, listening. "That's because you're hearing too much." Kavi blinked. "Too much." Andre gestured for him to turn off the radio. The shop quieted, save for the hum of fluorescent lights. "Now," Andre said, leaning closer to the engine, "listen to what's not there. Every good motor has a rhythm, like breathing. The trick is finding the space between sounds." Kavi bent closer, brow furrowed. For a few seconds, there was only silence and the faint tick of cooling metal. Then the boy nodded slowly. "She skips on the downstroke, like she's exhaling wrong." Andre's mouth curved into a small, proud smile. "Exactly. You don't fix the noise, you fix the breath." Mr. Singh, watching from the corner, called out, "You teach well, my friend. Maybe stay and open a school?" Andre chuckled. "You'd never get me to sit still long enough." "Then drive far enough," Mr. Singh said, "and come back when you're ready." While they worked, Claire wandered through the garage with her sketchbook. She watched how the light fell across the tools, catching glints of silver and gold. Sparks danced from a welder's torch like miniature fireworks, the smell of hot steel mixed with masala chai. She sat on a crate near the corner and began to draw, quick, fluid strokes that turned chaos into warmth. When she finished, the paper glowed with motion. Andre and Kavi bent over the engine, firelight from the welder bouncing off their faces, Mr. Singh in the background, holding a steaming cup of tea. She titled it quietly, "The Fire Inside the Workshop." As evening crept in, the repair wrapped up. Maple idled smoothly, her growl replaced by a deep, contented hum. Kavi grinned from ear to ear. "She's alive again." Andre patted the hood. "She just needed a few friends." Mr. Singh handed him a small box of leftover parts. "For the road. You never know what Canada's highways will ask of you." Then he turned to Claire. "You look like an artist, miss. Did you capture our mess?" She handed him the sketch. Mr. Singh studied it for a long moment, his expression softening. "You made us look noble," he said quietly. "You already were," she replied. He smiled, eyes bright. "Would you let me keep it? I'll hang it here. People forget art belongs in places like this, too." Claire nodded. "That's exactly why I drew it." Mr. Singh called one of his sons to frame the drawing immediately. Within minutes, it hung near the office door, pencil strokes of sweat, fire, and fellowship now part of the shop's story. The men paused, as if seeing themselves for the first time. When tea was poured and the last wrench set down, they all stood outside under the dim garage light. The wind from Superior carried a bite, smelling faintly of salt and cedar. Mr. Singh clasped Andre's shoulder. "Remember, my friend, roads are long, but kindness makes them shorter. Out here, we fix what breaks, not just engines." Andre's voice was quiet. "Thank you for reminding me of that." Claire snapped one last Polaroid of the group. Andre, Mr. Singh, Kavi, and the garage behind them glowing with warm yellow light. When the image developed, she taped it beside the previous one inside Maple. 2 moments, 2 proofs. As they pulled away, the garage lights faded behind them, leaving only the hum of Maple and the steady rhythm of the road. Claire rested her head against the window, watching the stars rise over the dark line of the lake. Andre adjusted the mirror, catching her reflection half asleep. For the first time in a long time, he felt something more than motion, something like belonging, stitched together from strangers and spark plugs. He whispered, mostly to himself, because to go far, we never really go alone. Maple rumbled softly in agreement, carrying them westward into the night, toward the next horizon waiting to be mended. By the time they reached Winnipeg, the weather had changed again. The air felt drier, thinner, as though the prairies had wrung the moisture out of the sky. Maple rumbled down Main Street, past the brick facades of the Exchange District, where time seemed to have stalled somewhere between 1910 and now. Old warehouses had been reborn as cafes, galleries, and vintage shops. Iron balconies hung like whispers of another century. Claire pressed her forehead to the window, watching the reflections slide across the glass, murals, bicycles, a saxophonist on a corner playing for no one in particular. It's like the city decided to keep its ghosts, she said. Andre parked outside a small coffee shop, tucked between a bookstore and a framing studio. Every place keeps something, he said, cutting the ignition. Some just polish it better. Inside, the cafe smelled of espresso and old brick. They found a table by the window. Claire set down her bag, pulled out her phone, and froze. Her inbox was open to a new message. Subject: Commission Proposal, Montreal. She opened it. A well-known curator was offering her a 6-figure contract for a series of large-scale abstract paintings, part of a show celebrating urban isolation in postmodern contexts. The words made her stomach twist. She'd painted that kind of thing before. Perfect lines, sterile meaning, beautiful but hollow. Andre noticed her silence. Good news? She hesitated. Financially, yes. Spiritually, not so much. He sipped his coffee. Big offer? Montreal Gallery. They want another series of people-less spaces. She sighed. I don't even paint like that anymore. Those were ghosts of paintings. Pretty, sellable, soulless. Then don't do it, Andre said simply. She looked at him. It's not that easy. You walk away from a show like this, you lose your footing in the scene. Andre leaned back. Maybe that's not the worst thing. She laughed softly, but it didn't reach her eyes. You sound like someone who's already given up on scenes. He smiled, a little sad. Maybe I just stopped pretending to belong in rooms that made me smaller. Before she could answer, Andre's phone buzzed on the table. A video call. The screen lit up with a small face. Maya, his 10-year-old daughter. Hey, sweetheart, Andre said, voice softening. You home from camp already? Dad, guess what? The little girl's smile was wide, missing a front tooth. I finished my loon drawing. The art teacher said it looked real. She held up the paper, the bird rendered in bright crayon, wide wings, black and white patterns like lace, red eyes glinting. Andre grinned. That's amazing, Maya. You even got the markings right. You're going to put me out of a job. Can I show Miss Claire? Maya asked. Claire leaned closer to the screen. Wow, that's beautiful, Maya. The loon's your favorite, huh? It reminds me of Mom, the girl said simply. The words fell into the cafe like a stone, into still water. Andre's hand tightened on the phone. Mom used to say loons never lose each other, Maya continued, even when they fly far apart. Claire smiled gently. She was right. Andre cleared his throat. I'll call you tonight, before bed, okay? Okay, Dad. Love you. Love you too. He ended the call, setting the phone face down. For a moment, the hum of the espresso machine filled the silence between them. Claire's eyes softened. She's incredible, Andre. Yeah, he said, voice low. She got her mother's eyes, and her stubbornness. The quiet stretched. Claire glanced out the window, at the passing crowds and the rhythm of the city still living while they paused. Do you ever feel like you're watching your own life from behind glass? She asked suddenly. Andre gave a rueful laugh. Every day since she died. Claire traced a circle on her coffee cup with her finger. That's how I feel about painting now. Like I'm performing belief in something I don't believe in anymore. Then maybe it's time to paint for yourself again. She nodded slowly, then whispered, I'm scared. Of what? Of slipping back, of becoming that person who paints for the applause and forgets why she started. The art world doesn't forgive hesitation, it eats it. Andre looked at her, understanding in his eyes. You think I don't get that? Every time I start the engine, I worry I'm dragging someone else's memory along for the ride. You're afraid of the machine that built you. I'm afraid of the one that broke, me. She met his gaze, surprised at how precisely he'd said what she couldn't. So what do we do? He smiled faintly. Maybe we keep driving until the noise fades. Outside, the light shifted. The sun dipped lower, painting long amber lines across the street. Claire leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment, feeling the warmth through the glass. The world kept moving. Buses, cyclists, laughter from the next table. But inside Maple, later that evening, everything slowed again. Andre parked by the Red River, just beyond the market. The sky was streaked with pink and blue, the air heavy with the smell of summer rain on brick. Claire sat on the RV steps, reading the Montreal email one more time before deleting it. Andre joined her, 2 mugs of tea in hand. You decide? He asked. She nodded. Yeah, if I paint again, it'll be for people who actually touch life, not for those who frame it. He handed her a mug. Good, because you can't build anything honest from walls. They sat there quietly, sipping tea as the evening breeze rustled through the trees. From somewhere across the river came the faint cry of a loon. Impossible, this far inland, but unmistakable. Claire looked up, smiling. Andre heard it too. Guess she's following us. Or reminding us not to get lost, Claire said softly. They stayed until the last light drained from the sky. Their reflections in Maple's window blurred together. 2 travelers still learning how to move without leaving themselves behind. They left Winnipeg behind as dawn stretched pale and cold across the horizon. The prairies opened before them like an unrolled canvas, endless, windswept, and brutally honest. Maple moved through it slowly, her old tires humming against the highway that sliced the land straight as a ruler. To the south, the fields shimmered with wheat that bent and whispered under the touch of the wind. To the north, nothing but distance and sky. Claire sat with her knees drawn up on the passenger seat, sketchbook balanced on her lap. She wasn't drawing, not yet, just watching. The light here was different, not soft like the lakes, not golden like the cities, but sharp, like truth itself. It feels like the sky's so low you could bruise your head on it, she murmured. Andre grinned. Yeah, Saskatchewan'll humble you. Makes you small, but in a way that feels honest. By afternoon, they'd stopped in a roadside turnout, somewhere near Grasslands National Park. There was no town in sight, only rolling fields and the occasional hawk circling overhead. Andre shut off the engine, and silence fell like a blanket. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Claire stepped out first, stretching her arms to the horizon. I feel like I could disappear here, she said, smiling. Half in awe, Andre followed her gaze. That's the danger, or the promise. They spread out a blanket beside Maple, sharing bread, cheese, and apples. The prairie wind tugged at Claire's hair, the strands catching sunlight like copper threads. For a long while, neither of them spoke. It wasn't uncomfortable, just full. Finally, Claire broke the quiet. Can I ask you something? Andre nodded, chewing slowly. When you fix things, cars, machines, do you ever think you're trying to fix yourself too? Andre looked out at the field thinking, used to, yeah. Now I think I just fix what I can reach. She tilted her head. And the rest? The rest I leave running even when it knocks. Claire smiled faintly. You sound like one of your engines again. He chuckled. I probably am. Then he turned the question back on her. Why did you really start painting? She hesitated, tracing a finger along the rim of her cup. Because I wanted to be seen, she said finally. Not understood, just seen. Every piece I sold, every gallery that applauded, it was like oxygen. I painted what people wanted to praise, not what I actually felt. Andre studied her quietly. So you painted to be liked. Exactly. And somewhere in there I stopped recognizing the person behind the brush. I used to think art was about truth, but maybe I just wanted permission, he nodded slowly. We're not that different then. Claire raised an eyebrow. How so? Andre's gaze went far, past the horizon. I spent most of my life trying to do everything right, not because I believed it made me good, but because I was scared to be wrong, scared to mess up, to confirm what people already thought of a black man raising a kid alone. So I built my life like an instruction manual. Tight, neat, no surprises. Safe. Claire's voice softened. But safe can be its own kind of cage. He looked at her. You'd know. I do, she whispered. Evening crept up quietly, the sky shifting from pale blue to the bruised violet of twilight. Andre built a small fire in a ring of stones beside Maple, while Claire sketched the horizon in shades of gray and ochre. The wind softened, and the first stars began to show. Small, shy at first, then endless. They sat near the fire, its glow flickering over their faces. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, long and low. Claire looked up, eyes reflecting the flames. You ever think about writing to your son? Andre froze for a second, then nodded slowly. All the time. Why don't you? He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. Because I don't know what to say that doesn't sound like an apology. Maybe that's exactly what you should say. He stared at the dark screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. After a moment, he began to type. Slowly, uncertainly. Hey, Jerome. I've been thinking about you. About how much I miss trying to get it right instead of just trying to be here. I don't know where to start, but maybe starting is enough. He stopped, reading it over. Then he locked the phone and set it down beside him. You didn't send it, Claire said quietly. Not yet, he replied. I want the words to sound like I mean them. She smiled softly. They already do. The fire popped, sending a small shower of sparks into the night. Andre leaned back, staring at the prairie sky, an ocean of black velvet pricked with stars. The Milky Way spilled across it like a river of light. Claire followed his gaze. You ever realize how small we are? Andre nodded. Yeah, but tonight it doesn't feel like a bad thing. They sat side by side, shoulders almost touching, the silence around them deep and alive. The wind swept across the grass, carrying whispers from nowhere and everywhere at once. After a while, Claire said, You know, maybe we're all just trying to leave some kind of mark. Yours is in engines, mine's in paint. But maybe the truest marks aren't the ones that last. They're the ones that change us while we make them. Andre looked at her, then at the faint glow of the unsent email on his phone. Maybe you're right. The fire burned lower, and the prairie stretched infinite and open before them. Above, the stars pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, fragile, eternal. When they finally turned in for the night, Claire taped a new scrap of paper above the RV's cabinet, next to the photos and sketches. In her looping handwriting, it read, Day 12, still learning how to start. Andre smiled when he saw it. That's a good one, Claire yawned. Then maybe tomorrow you'll hit send. He didn't answer, but in the dark, the glow from his phone screen stayed on a little longer than before, as if both man and machine were quietly finding the courage to speak again. By the time the Rockies appeared on the horizon, their peaks dusted white against the morning sky, Andre hadn't slept more than an hour. The road had carried him west for days, but this morning it felt heavier, like every mile was tightening around something he'd been avoiding. Claire sensed it. She said little, only refilled his coffee, and rested a hand briefly on his arm when the silence between them stretched too long. They reached Calgary by noon, sunlight flashing against glass towers, and sharp mountain air cutting through the streets. The city felt busy, purposeful, the opposite of the prairie's endless quiet. Andre parked Maple near a college campus, across from a small cafe tucked between a used bookstore and a bike shop. The sign read, Steam and Letters. Here? Claire asked softly. Andre nodded. He likes this place. He used to study here when he was at Sayet. She watched him run a hand over the steering wheel, his knuckles pale. You don't have to do it today. I do, he said. If I wait any longer, I'll start believing I don't deserve to. Claire touched his shoulder. Then I'll wait right here. Andre stepped out, the air cold enough to sting. The bell above the cafe door jingled as he entered. Inside, the light was warm and amber, the scent of roasted beans and rain-soaked coats filling the small space. Jerome sat by the window, tall, early 20s, posture stiff, phone in hand, but not really looking at it. When his father appeared, he froze. Andre stood for a moment, the noise of the cafe blurring into nothing. Hey, he said quietly. Jerome blinked once. Hey. His voice was lower now, deeper than Andre remembered. They sat. For a few seconds, neither spoke. A barista's laughter from the counter filled the space between them. Andre broke first. You look good, son. Jerome gave a small nod. You too. A little grayer, Andre smiled weakly. Comes with mileage. Silence again. Jerome traced a thumb along the edge of his mug. You drove all the way here just to say that, Andre swallowed. No. I drove here to stop not saying things. Jerome looked up sharply. That's new. Andre's hands tightened around his cup. I know I disappeared after your mom passed. Not just physically. I was there, but not really there. You were a ghost, Jerome said. His tone wasn't cruel, just tired. You fixed engines. You fixed everyone's car in the neighborhood, but you never fixed what was right in front of you. Andre flinched, but didn't argue. You're right. Jerome's eyes softened, but only slightly. I kept waiting for you to say something, anything, but you didn't. You just folded up. Andre exhaled. I didn't know how to hold grief without breaking you in the process. You didn't have to hold it for me, Jerome said, voice low. You just had to show me it was survivable. Andre stared at the table, then finally met his son's eyes. I thought being strong meant silence. I thought if I kept busy, kept moving, it would stop hurting, for both of us. Jerome shook his head. You stopped being my dad when you stopped being a person. Andre nodded, the words hitting him like rain on metal. And I've been trying to find that person again ever since. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. I wrote something for you weeks ago, didn't send it. I think I was scared it wouldn't matter. Jerome looked away, eyes glinting. You still have it? Andre unlocked his screen and slid the phone across the table. Jerome read silently. Hey, Jerome. I've been thinking about you, about how much I missed trying to get it right instead of just trying to be here. I don't know where to start, but maybe starting is enough. Jerome's thumb hovered over the screen. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. You didn't send it because you thought I'd ignore it. Andre nodded. Or that you'd answer, and I wouldn't know what to do. Jerome laughed softly, bitter and breaking. You really are bad at letting people in. Andre smiled faintly. I'm learning. Late, but learning. For a long while. Neither of them spoke. Outside, snow flurries began to drift across the street. Inside, the world narrowed to two people finally saying what had been waiting in their chests for years. Jerome's voice softened. You know, I don't hate you. I know. I just didn't know how to reach you. Andre's reply came barely above a whisper. That makes two of us. The bell above the door jingled again. Claire stepped inside, hesitant at first. She caught Andre's eye, then smiled gently. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. I just thought maybe you both needed some air. Jerome wiped his face quickly, standing. You must be Claire. She nodded. The accomplice. He chuckled. Thanks for keeping him in one piece. Andre stood too, a little unsteady. This is your old man's co-pilot, he said. She's been teaching me to stop running from the things that don't chase anymore. Jerome looked between them, the stiffness in his shoulders easing. Well, you're doing better than I expected. Small steps, Andre said. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out the Polaroid camera. Before you both start retreating back into your corners, she said with a grin, I want proof this actually happened. They laughed. Awkward but real. She framed them through the lens. Andre and Jerome side by side. The resemblance clear now. The same steady eyes. The same uncertain half smile. She clicked the shutter. The camera whirred softly. spitting out the picture. As the image developed, Jerome looked down, then reached for his father. Not a full embrace, just a brief, awkward pull, arms around shoulders, tight for a second, then gone. But it was enough. Andre's throat tightened. Thanks, son. Jerome's voice cracked just slightly. Don't make this the last time. Andre nodded. I won't. I'm learning how to send things now. Outside, the snow thickened, coating Maple in white. Claire taped the new Polaroid above the dashboard later that evening. 3 figures, one fragile piece. As they drove out of Calgary, the mountains rose ahead, sharp and vast. Andre kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting over the spot on his chest where the hug still lingered. For the first time in years, the road didn't feel like escape. It felt like return. They reached Banff under a sky so clear it felt almost unreal, like the mountains had scrubbed it clean for them. The highway wound upward, cutting through pine forests and walls of rock that gleamed with snowmelt. Maple climbed steadily, her old engine humming like a tired hymn. Claire leaned forward, gazing through the windshield as peaks rose all around them. It's like the land just decided to stand up and breathe, she murmured. Andre smiled faintly. Yeah, reminds you how small you are, and how lucky to be here at all. They met Evelyn Cho at the ranger station, a lean woman in her 40s, Parks Canada badge pinned to her vest, and a kindness that came from living close to the wild. She had known Andre years ago, back when he had done short-term maintenance contracts across Alberta. Still driving that old GMC? She teased, squinting at Maple. Andre chuckled. Still running, barely. Well, she deserves a view then, Evelyn said, tossing them a pair of park passes. There's a trail open near Lake O'Hara. Quiet this time of year. I'll take you up. You'll want to see it before the season turns. The road narrowed as they climbed higher, the air thinning and sweet with fir and snow. When they reached the overlook, Claire stepped out first, breath catching in her throat. Below them, the lake burned, turquoise, framed by jagged peaks dusted in white. The reflection shimmered like another world turned upside down. Evelyn stood beside them. You see why we protect places like this, she said softly. They remind us what's still whole. Claire nodded, unable to speak. Andre walked a few steps away, hands deep in his jacket pockets. His boots crunched against the frost-dusted ground until he reached a small clearing beneath a lone Douglas fir. The trunk rose dark and strong, its roots gripping the earth like an anchor. He crouched there for a long moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a rusted house key, the one that had opened the door to the home he'd shared with Darlene. He turned it in his palm, the metal worn smooth at the edges. Claire approached quietly. What's that? The old house key, he said. I kept it all this time. Thought maybe one day I'd go back, fix it up, start again. But that place isn't home anymore. It's a museum of what used to be. She watched him dig a shallow hole at the base of the tree, fingers trembling slightly. He placed the key inside, covered it with soil, and pressed his palm flat against the ground. Goodbye, he whispered, then added something softer, almost to himself. Second light. Claire tilted her head. What does that mean? He looked up, eyes reflecting the mountain's blue. When my wife was in the hospital, she said if I ever got lost, I should wait for the second light of morning. The first one's for endings, she said. The second's for beginnings. Guess I've been waiting long enough. Claire swallowed hard, blinking back the sting in her eyes. She knelt beside him, brushing a bit of pine needle from his sleeve. Then maybe this is it, the second light. He smiled, a quiet, grateful kind of smile that came from deep in the chest. Yeah, maybe it is. They sat in silence, the wind moving gently through the trees. Evelyn, standing at a respectful distance, called out, You two coming? There's a lookout just over the ridge. Claire rose and reached for her pack. As she did, something small clattered from it, the broken wooden compass she'd bought weeks earlier at the Belleville gas stop. She picked it up, turning it in her hand. The needle was still stuck, pointing stubbornly east. Andre chuckled. Still lost, huh? Maybe it just needs a reason to move. She dug out a tiny screwdriver, and began adjusting the hinge beneath the glass. After a few careful twists, the compass face loosened and the needle wobbled, then began to spin freely. She held it up to him. There, no more east or west, just motion. Andre laughed softly. What does that make it now? A reminder, she said. That direction isn't the same as purpose. He nodded, the words sinking in deeper than she knew. Together they walked up the short ridge, joining Evelyn at the edge. From there the world unfolded beneath them, valleys streaked with rivers of silver, glaciers catching sunlight like glass. The wind carried the scent of pine and something older, purer, beyond names. Evelyn pointed to the far horizon. See that peak? When the sun sets behind it, the lake turns gold. Locals call it the hour of surrender, Claire whispered. That sounds like peace. Andre looked at her, his face open, unguarded. Maybe that's what we've been chasing all along. They stayed until the sky deepened into amber and violet. Evelyn said her goodbyes and headed back down the trail, leaving them alone in the cooling air. Claire slipped her hand into Andre's. So what now? He watched the light shift over the water. Now we build from what's left. No more fixing, just making. She smiled, squeezing his fingers. And if we lose our way? He glanced at the compass in her hand. The needle spun once, then slowly came to rest, pointing not north, not south, but toward where they stood. Then we find center, he said. They stood there until the cold bit their cheeks and the first stars began to rise. Down below, the buried key slept beneath the fir tree, and the mountains kept their quiet watch. The lake mirrored the last sliver of daylight, the second light, before it faded into night, carrying with it the sound of two hearts learning, finally, to stay. The next morning, clouds drifted low over the peaks, their edges catching thin ribbons of sunlight. Maple was parked by a small turnout above Yoho Valley, steam rising faintly from her exhaust. Andre brewed coffee outside while Claire sat on the RV steps, scrolling through her phone for the first time in days. A notification popped up. Montreal Gallery, urgent request. Her chest tightened. She opened it. We're ready to move forward with your new series. The board wants Isolation Reimagined for the fall showcase. Montreal, then possibly New York. 6 figures confirmed. You'll need to return by next week to begin production. The words gleamed on her screen like bait dipped in gold. For a long moment, she just stared. The sound of boiling coffee and distant waterfalls blurred together. Andre handed her a mug. You look like someone who just saw a ghost. She forced a smile. Maybe I did. He sat beside her, the steam curling between them. Montreal? Yeah, they want me back, big show, money, prestige, all the things I thought I wanted. Andre studied her face. And now? Now it feels like walking back into a room where I can't breathe. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed sharply. 2 alerts in quick succession. One from his bank. Suspicious, transaction flagged. Another from the Toronto workshop where he'd once worked part-time. He read silently, frowning. What's wrong? Claire asked. He exhaled. Fraud charge on my card. Someone's been using it back east. And the shop. Short-staffed again. Asking if I can come in for a few weeks. Guess reality doesn't wait for the mountains to clear. She looked at him. What will you do? He shrugged, staring into his cup. Don't know yet. Maybe fix what's right in front of me, like always. The wind shifted, carrying a faint chill. For a while, neither spoke. The mountains loomed quiet, ancient, patient. Finally, Claire whispered, It's strange, isn't it? The world always finds a way to test you right when you think you've found balance. Andre gave a dry laugh. Guess that's how it checks if you mean it. She turned the phone over in her hands. The gallery email was still open. The promise of money, fame, recognition, all of it, right there, waiting. If I go, she said softly, I lose this. Us, the road, the truth I finally started to trust again. Andre looked at her, eyes calm. And if you stay, I'll disappoint everyone who built their version of me. The one who never hesitates, never doubts. He took a slow sip. Maybe it's time they met the real one. She breathed out, trembling just slightly. Then, without another word, she opened the email, hovered over the reply box, and typed, "Thank you for believing in my work. But I can't paint what I don't feel anymore. Not for a price, not for applause. Maybe someday I'll come back with something real." Her finger lingered over send, then pressed. The whoosh of the message leaving felt like an exhale, years overdue. Andre watched her, expression unreadable. "You just turned down a fortune." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I just chose one." He nodded slowly. "You're braver than you think." A moment later, he pulled his own phone from his jacket. The unsent draft to Jerome still waited, patient as ever. He opened it, read the familiar words once more. His thumb hovered above the screen. Claire noticed. "Maybe it's your turn," she said gently. Andre hesitated, then smiled. "Yeah, guess so." He pressed send. The signal bars flickered weakly, then steadied. The message went through. For a moment, he just stared at the confirmation icon. Simple, quiet, irreversible. Claire reached for his hand. "How do you feel?" "Like something finally moved," he said. They sat there as the wind picked up again, stirring the pines, the lake below glimmering with scattered light. The world hadn't changed, but they had. Two people who had stopped running long enough to choose what mattered. Claire picked up her sketchbook, flipping to a blank page. With a piece of charcoal, she wrote 4 words across the top. "We don't bury hope, we plant it." Andre leaned closer, reading, then nodded. "That's it," he said. "That's the story." And as the mountains held their silence around them, Maple idled softly in the background, ready, patient, waiting for the next road that would begin not with escape, but with roots. The ferry cut across the water like a slow heartbeat, its hull humming as mist rolled in from the Pacific. Andre and Claire stood by the railing, shoulders brushing, the wind sharp and wet against their faces. Below them, Maple waited on the cargo deck, her sides splattered with salt spray, a veteran of too many miles. Claire closed her eyes and drew in a long breath. "You can smell the difference," she said softly. "The air here doesn't lie." Andre smiled. "No," he said. "It's honest. Like salt. It stings, but it heals." When the ferry docked at Nanaimo, the morning light broke through thin clouds. They drove west through cedar forests, the road twisting toward Tofino. The world grew wilder with every turn. By the time they reached the coast, the sky had turned to pewter, and the sea roared like something alive. They parked near Ucluelet, where waves hurled themselves against black rock, and driftwood lay tangled along the sand. Claire set up her easel right at the edge of the wind. Her hair whipped across her face, but she didn't move to brush it away. Andre watched her mix colors, blue so dark it looked like ink, gray with hints of green, white with a touch of gold. The first strokes landed bold and certain. "It's not the sea," she murmured. "It's the breath of it." Andre sat on a log, the roar of water behind him, the smell of pine and salt thick in the air. He pulled out his phone, hesitated, then opened his inbox. There was a new message from Jerome. His chest tightened as he opened it. "Dad, I got your message," it read. "I've been thinking too. Maybe we both needed time to learn how to say things out loud. I don't know where to start either, but I'm ready to try again." Andre stared until the letters blurred. The sound of the ocean grew louder, almost like a pulse. Claire turned, sensing his stillness, and he handed her the phone. She smiled. "Looks like the tide's finally changing." Andre swallowed hard. "Yeah," he said, voice rough. "It is." She turned back to her canvas, brush moving in long arcs as the wind tugged at her sleeves. He built a fire in the sand, the flames struggling against the wind, but holding. As the tide crept closer, the edges of her canvas glistened with mist. When she stepped back, the painting shimmered, a sea that seemed to breathe, its motion captured in layers of light. As dusk fell, they sat wrapped in a blanket, watching the waves break into white foam. What should we call the cabin? Claire asked. Andre thought for a while. The wind combed through the fire, making it hiss softly. Second light, he said. She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. Perfect. 2 weeks later, they found a small piece of land near a creek in Comox Valley. The locals called it Borrowed Earth, a community space where artists and builders came to create, then leave behind something that could be used again. Evelyn from Parks Canada had helped arrange it. Andre bought a few cedar planks, a box of screws, and borrowed tools from a communal shed that smelled of sawdust and rain. Claire drew a rough plan on the back of a discarded canvas. 1 room, she said. Big windows facing west. Let's keep it imperfect so it can breathe. Andre laughed. That's my kind of plan. They worked together every day, measuring, cutting, holding beams, steady as the walls began to rise. The air filled with the rhythm of saws, hammer blows, and laughter. Some evenings, it rained so hard the ground turned to mud, but they kept working, soaked and happy. One afternoon, the tablet on the bench lit up with an incoming call. Maya's face appeared, her grin wide and proud. Dad? You're really building it? Andre laughed. Sure am. Want to see the first plank go in? She nodded quickly, and Claire tilted the camera so Maya could see. Andre lifted a cedar beam into place. All right, sweetheart, he said. You ready? Ready, she said. Together, he and Claire pushed the beam upright and fastened it into position. The creek murmured behind them, wind rustling the tall grass. When it was done, Andre stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. There, he said. The first stone, even if it's wood. Maya giggled. It's like giant Lego, Claire laughed. Exactly. You're part of it now. Maya looked at the unfinished cabin, then said, It needs a name. Andre smiled. We already have one. He pointed to a plank leaning nearby. On it, Claire had carved 2 words with her pocket knife. Second light. Maya studied the letters and said, It sounds like something that keeps shining even when it's dark. Andre's voice caught. That's the idea, baby girl. By evening, the skeleton of the cabin stood proud. 1 window opened to the western light. Claire took out her Polaroid and captured 4 pictures. The sea, the half-built frame, Andre's paint-smeared hands, and her own face mid-laughter. She taped them inside maple side by side, a timeline made of small truths. That night, they ate soup under a string of borrowed bulbs, the creek singing nearby. Andre ran his thumb over the carved words on the cedar beam. Feels like we're finally building forward, he said. Claire leaned into him. Not from what's perfect, she whispered. From what's left. And that's enough. The last evening came sooner than they expected. The sun melted into the Pacific, turning the horizon gold and violet. The air smelled of kelp and wood smoke. Claire leaned her finished canvas against Maple's side. The salt wind had already begun to leave pale streaks across the paint, like fingerprints of the sea. Andre sat on a rock nearby, holding a small tin box, the one he'd carried since the beginning of the trip. Inside were letters, some written to Darlene, others never sent. He unfolded one, the paper soft at the corners. You told me once that grief was a tide, he read quietly. It leaves, then returns, softer each time. You were right. He folded the letter again and slipped it into his jacket. You don't bury what matters, he murmured. You carry it. Claire heard him and turned, her hair glowing orange in the fading light. Still talking to her? She asked gently. Always, he said. She's part of the road now. Claire opened her tablet and began typing, her fingers steady. To the gallery? Andre asked. Yes. She smiled without looking up. It's time to tell them the truth, she typed. Thank you for the offer. I'll only exhibit when my work tells the truth, when it belongs to life, not walls. Then she pressed send. The sound of it was clean, like a wave breaking on shore. They stood together on the cliff as twilight settled, the Pacific endless before them. Claire rested her head on Andre's shoulder. So, she said, back to Toronto? Andre nodded. For now. We'll come back in the fall. Finish the walls. Hang your painting above the window. Claire smiled. Second light will be ready for winter. The surf rolled below them, steady, eternal. Andre looked out at the water and spoke quietly. We didn't come here to find east or west, he said. We came to find center. Claire lifted her gaze toward him. And did we? He reached for her hand, their fingers fitting easily together. Yeah, he said. We did. Right here. The last light slipped behind the horizon. The sky darkened, stars appearing one by one, and the ocean breathed in the dark, a slow, endless rhythm that sounded like peace. Behind them, Maple waited in the soft dusk, her paint dulled by salt, her engine resting after a long road. Tomorrow they would drive back across the island, catch the ferry, and return east. But tonight, the world felt still. Claire watched the waves and thought of every road they had taken, every silence they had crossed. Andre stood beside her, one hand in his pocket, fingers brushing the old key buried beneath the tree at Lake O'Hara. It was no longer a weight, it was a seed. Above them the stars shimmered like signals from far away, and the ocean answered in kind. They stayed until the tide rose around their feet, until the wind grew cold, and then they walked back to Maple, their steps in rhythm with the sea. For the first time in a long time, neither of them looked back.